Hi there, it's me, David Nacho, again. It's been a tremendous joy to read your thoughts and your questions over the last few days in this course, God's Total Response. In this short video, I would like to offer some reflections on the importance of the Decalogue, or the Ten Commandments as we usually refer to them, for Israel's understanding of who Yahweh is and who they are called to be as Yahweh's people. As we mentioned before, the emphasis on the holiness of God is an important feature of the passage. And that's how chapter 20 begins, right? As we said, the holiness of God de-absolutizes every other claimant to power over any aspect of the life of Israel. It is not my intention to offer a comprehensive exegesis of the Ten Commandments. Rather, I just want to share with you what many commentators have noticed about the form and the content of these commandments, in the hope that this might help you understand how they can speak into our sense of discipleship and mission today. So let's begin. It's been widely observed that the Decalogue is divided in two major sections. The first one having to do with the relationship between Yahweh and the people. And here we're referring to commandments 1 to 3. While the second section outlines what just human relationships should look like. And we're referring to commandments 5 to 10. However, nestled between these two sections is the fourth commandment, which belongs to both parts, but also connects them. This commandment, the fourth commandment, has to do with Sabbath keeping. If you, just even by looking at the text, you'll notice that it receives special attention. Quite a bit of ink used for this. So it will receive some due attention from our part as well. So let's look at the first section, the first three commandments, shall we? You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above, or on earth beneath, or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them. These three commandments assert the unrecruitability of Yahweh. Israel, as Yahweh's people, cannot capture him, cannot contain him. And of course, they cannot manage him. We tend to bureaucratize faith, and we tend to establish things that lead us to think sometimes that we are managing the will of God or the power of God. But we cannot recruit him to our interests or confine him to our interests. This is the intention of the first three commandments. Calvin, the great reformer, noted that we all invent idols in an infinite number. Additionally, Luther has warned us that whatever a person loves can become their God, for he carries it in his heart. He goes about with it. Night and day. He sleeps and wakes with it, be it what it may, wealth or self, pleasure or renown. So again, these commandments remind us that we cannot manipulate Yahweh to justify our actions. We cannot capture him. He cannot be bureaucratized. He cannot be contained or managed. The second section, as we said, has to do with just human relationships. Honor your father and your mother. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife or his servants, his ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. These commandments make an Exodus-like community possible. Let's look at them in a bit more detail. In a covenant community, parents are called to mediate the life of God to their children, and that is the reason why we honor them. The following commandments have the goal of protecting persons and property. But remember, these commandments were given to a people who had been scarred by extreme oppression. They were slaves in Egypt. Therefore, the protection of property, we can argue, does not primarily mean a rule of private property or an emphasis on private property. Rather, it can be argued that they are meant to be a defense of the weak against the rapacious capacity of the strong, the greedy, or the lustful. Let's look at the testimony of, at the commandment about not giving false testimony against our neighbors. Walter Brueggemann correctly notes that the issue of not giving false testimony should be understood especially in the context of the courts, and in the issue of access to justice. Courts are seen to be crucial, right? And you notice that as you read through the Torah. Because in social disputes that relate to political, economic matters, it is the capacity and responsibility of the court to determine, limit, and shape reality, actually. How does that work? It works because if power and interest can intrude upon truth by way of influence, manipulation, or bribe, then truth has no chance. Truth is reduced to power, and the powerless are then easily predictably exploited. The commandment about not coveting pertains to cherishing the lust for something desirable, not to necessarily to the act itself, but the lust inside. Chris Wright notes that this commandment prohibited something which could also be realized in practical deed without necessarily breaking the law. It was and remains possible to fulfill a covetous desire without doing anything technically illegal. The last commandment, therefore, provides that radical thrust to the Decalogue which distinguishes it from mere legislation. For it indicates that while having done nothing illegal by human standards, a person can nevertheless be morally guilty before God. So let's talk a little bit about the fourth commandment, the one having to do with the Sabbath. In the passage of Exodus 20, verses 8 to 11, it is rooted in creation itself. And it's between the two sections of the Ten Commandments of the Decalogue, as we said. That place is strategic because it knits together the cosmic and the concrete realities of a people. The fourth commandment is a reminder that God does not value human life or humans by their ability to produce. We are not machines. We have worth apart from what we produce. This is a tough lesson in highly industrialized societies. where human life is objectified when we are measured around productivity in the name of economic efficiency. Sabbath benefits the individual, but it is an act of grace for the individual to others. And I would like you to notice some things. Again, remember that this commandment was given to a slave, formerly a slave people, by their new king. So notice the contrast between this king, Yahweh, who decrees Sabbath, and Pharaoh, the king who exploited people up to death. This is a king that rests in creation, and this is a king that allows for rest. So we are called to treat ourselves and to treat others sabbatically, if you will. This is an important point for discipleship and for mission. What do you think?